responsible for First Nations, Métis in Northern Affairs in May of 2012. So, Minister Reiter, you're basically a regular here with us, which is great. We are pleased to have Minister Reiter here with us today, as it really truly speaks to the responsive relationship we continue to have with him and his ministry. And let me tell you, folks, I have taken advantage of that friendship on a time or two, and I appreciate the ability to do that. At SUMA, we certainly appreciate that Minister Reiter is very willing to take our calls at any hour and sit down with us in meetings, and the willingness to work with the urban sector, which allows us to do what we need to do on behalf of you, our members. Delegates, would you please join me in a warm SUMA support of welcome to Minister Reiter. Thank you.
Well, this is the one?
They're both yours. One has spit.
Yeah, I moved that one. Thank you, President Deb. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be with you today. And before I start, I just have a few colleagues that I'd like to introduce that are here with me today. I have the privilege of having two legislative secretaries to assist me in different parts of my portfolio. I have Kevin Phillips. You all know Kevin. He's a former mayor of Melfort. Also the MLA for Melfort now, proud to have him in our caucus, and Legislative Secretary for Regional Municipal Cooperation. We also have Victoria Jurgens. Victoria is the MLA for Prince Albert Northcote, and she's Legislative Secretary for Northern Saskatchewan. And my good friend and caucus colleague Paul Merriman, the MLA for Saskatoon Sutherland. And walking in late is my friend and cabinet colleague, the Honourable Scott Moe, Minister of the Environment. I just have to acknowledge, Scott, the fact that I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the speech today, and also the Premier mentioned yesterday about the catastrophic flooding we had on the east side of the province this year. And Scott and I spent many hours this summer touring to many communities, Scott, and Scott just got appointed to cabinet in June, so he was a rookie cabinet minister. In the month of July, he became a veteran very quickly and did an amazing job, so thank you for that, Scott. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, a friend who's in municipal work, actually, and he mentioned to me, he said, you know, you must be thrilled right now. He said, you know, you had a municipal career, you've always loved politics since you were a kid, which is true, and now you're the minister in charge of municipal affairs. He said, you must love that because, you know, you politicians, you know, everywhere you go, everybody knows you and you get treated like royalty. He's a smart guy, but he doesn't know anything about politics. Yesterday, I'd like to tell you about my day yesterday. I had some stuff on in the morning. I was here in the morning for the Premier's address, and then we hustled over to the Saskatoon Cabinet office. I had a committee meeting there, and then I rushed back here because I had a series of meetings with municipalities in the afternoon, starting with a 3 o'clock meeting with Malcolm Eaton, Malcolm's here somewhere, and the City Council from Humboldt. And it was about 5 to 3 when I walked into TCU Place, and I was cutting through, we have a meeting room at the back, and I was cutting through the trade show. And a young guy that I guess works at TCU stopped me, and he said, I'm sorry you can't come in here without a SUMA identification. I said, oh, I kind of have a meeting back there. Would you mind if I just go do that, and I'll leave right after, or I'll get somebody to vouch for me? And he said, no, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, and I can't let you back there. But he was this is true, he was very nice though, and he could tell I was a little worried, and he said, you know what, the SUMA registration desk just over there, maybe they can help you. Maybe they can get you a temporary pass or something. So I went over, and I was telling the staff there, they were awesome, by the way, Laurent and Deb, they were awesome. And as I'm talking to them, they're trying to figure out what to do to let me in, and all of a sudden it hit me. My staff, Don Morgan, has been caught up in traffic somewhere, he's missing a flight or something, and he's going to be here later today. You all know Don Morgan, he's our education minister, former attorney general, wonderful guy. Anyway, he asked that that I'd have his package here waiting for him. So my staff had given this to me, and all of a sudden it hit me, and I said, you know what, never mind, I'm good. The guy doesn't know who I am. So I dug Don Morgan's pass out of my briefcase and put it on and went in, did my meeting. So anyway, if any of you know Don Morgan and you see him later today or tomorrow, you might want to mention to him that he needs to clear up his bar tab at the Besbro. So sometimes in politics, there's those sorts of things that keep you humble because honestly, nobody knows who you are or what you do. And then there's other times you wish you could fly under the radar more. Case in point of that one, forgive me, I don't remember exactly when this was, 3 or 4 years ago. I was in the Premier's office for a meeting one afternoon. We were in there for a while. And I left the meeting, I walked out, I opened the big door into the hallway, and as I stepped into the hall, this flash of light hit me, and there's a scrum of people waiting. It was a bunch of reporters. Now my first thought was, this can't be for me, I haven't done anything dumb today yet. So it'd be for the Premier. And as I stepped out, one of the reporters started to laugh and said, hey, you're not the Premier. So what you should say is, no, he's still in there, he'll be just a minute, he'll be right out. That's what I should have said. What I did say was, no, I'm taller and better looking. So the reporters all laughed, and just then the Premier comes out his doorway, and he, greeted by all this laughter and all the reporters looking at me, and he looks at me and goes, what'd you do? And I did what any good politician would do. I said, Mr. Premier, I've been misquoted. So I left. I went back to my office, and I forgot all about it. Now, some of you may remember, those of you who follow politics closely in this province, there was a reporter for a lot of years. His name was James Wood. He did work for the Star Phoenix and the Leader Post. And every Saturday, he used to do a column. It was called the Legislative Notebook. And it would be sort of short, interesting things that were happening around politics in the province and around the legislature. That Saturday morning, that was I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday when that happened, had forgot all about it. That Saturday morning, I pick up the paper, I start reading the Legislative Notebook, and to my horror, I read all about my glib comments about the Premier in the Star Phoenix. So I'm feeling kind of bad, and I sent him a text right away, and I said, Premier, I don't know if you've seen the Notebook. I'm really sorry. It was meant as a joke. I didn't think it would ever end up in the paper. I got a text back from right away that was very gracious and said, don't worry, my friend, it was funny. And then 10 seconds later, another text that said, and it's not true.
Well, you all are talking.
Yeah. He's wrong, it is true. So a gentleman by the name of Brian Lee Crowley is managing director of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And about a month ago, he wrote an article in the Globe and Mail. And that article really struck me. And I want to read you a quote from it now. This is a quote from that article. For the first third of the 20th century, which was the third largest province in Canada by population after Ontario and Quebec? BC? Nope. Alberta? Nope. Saskatchewan. If you correctly guess Saskatchewan, you'll probably also know that the province is again setting the pace as the place to be in Canada. If when you think Saskatchewan, you still envision dust bowls and the sound of paint peeling off ancient grain elevators, you probably still have rabbit ears on your black and white television. Brad Wall, the best Premier in the country, is leading the most dynamic province in the Dominion. That's the quote from Brian Lee Crowley. So this afternoon, I want to speak to you about some of the programs and initiatives in the Ministry of Government Relations that we have to ensure that our province continues to be the most dynamic province in the Dominion. Programs for infrastructure, for annexation compensation, and for public safety. Programs to keep our municipalities strong. But before I do that, first let me acknowledge, as the Premier did yesterday, what for many of you is the importance of the Municipal Revenue Sharing Grant. You all know we're heading into a much tighter budget this year. The dramatic drop in the price of oil is forcing us to take a long and hard look at the programs we deliver and what we're going to have available in funding to third parties. Everything is on the table right now as we work through our budget deliberations. I know you're concerned over possible changes to municipal revenue sharing program, a program that I think it's fair to say is the envy of municipal groups across the country. In Alberta, Municipal Affairs Minister Diane McQueen is saying that they can't promise current funding to municipalities will be safe this year given the economic state of their province. So we're not alone in the tough decisions that have to be made. Our provincial counterparts are facing the same critical decisions. Today, I can't give you a definitive answer on revenue sharing, but I can say this. I think there's a perception among some people, including those in the media, that somehow the decision's been made and the Premier and myself and my colleagues are somehow being coy and not wanting to share that decision with you. I can assure you that just is simply not the case. We're in the middle of budget deliberations. No decisions have been made. And I will tell you this, however, though. I will tell you how mindful and respectful we are of a program that's fundamental to your budgets and any decisions that we do consider, that we will consider that, and we will not make those decisions lightly. The theme of your convention this year is the urban heartbeat, and that caused me to reflect on the heartbeat, per se, of Saskatchewan, not very long ago. You've all heard speeches from many politicians in the past who talk about sort of the standing joke in Saskatchewan was that when our kids or grandkids graduated high school or university, the traditional gift was luggage because they needed to move away from home to seek a career and a life outside of Saskatchewan. That's no longer the case. We're seeing our young people staying here in our great province to raise their families, to work, to set their careers. And I was reminded of this last summer. It really hit home to me personally. My brother and his family live in Lloydminster, and I was up there visiting this summer. And on the Saturday morning, my oldest nephew, Jeremy, said, "Uncle Jim, I want to take you for a ride." So we drove to an area of Lloydminster where there was a huge housing development going on. There's houses and condos going up. It's a big development. And I didn't know why we were there, but he pointed out a townhouse in the condo area and told me he had just put a down payment down on that. And he was pretty excited about it. And as I looked around, it suddenly hit me that this huge development is on the Saskatchewan side. That would have never happened a few years ago. And the great thing is, when I was so excited about that, he didn't understand it. To him, the opportunity is the same on either side of the border. For my nephew, the Saskatchewan-Alberta border didn't matter. He was too young to remember the way it used to be. So I wondered if this was an anomaly. So I did some checking, and I was surprised to find out that between 2001 and 2005, the population for the Lloydminster side, for the Saskatchewan side of the Lloydminster border, grew by 4%, while the Alberta side was 18%. So now you fast forward to 2009 to 2013, and the stats are amazing. The Alberta side, the population increased by 15%. On the Saskatchewan side, 26%. It's incredible, ladies and gentlemen. That's more Saskatchewan people, more opportunity, and more Rough Rider fans. On infrastructure funding, we were very pleased back in June to sign a renewed 10-year gas tax agreement with the federal government. And also, since I spoke to you last convention, the new Building Canada Fund has also been renewed, and the first application intake was recently closed. And on a topic that's related to infrastructure and the investment climate, we're also working on trying to balance what at times can seem like competing interests between municipalities and businesses. In November, I announced that we would be looking at the whole issue of tax tools, other fees and charges, and road maintenance agreements. While this review might pertain a little bit more specifically to SARM because much of it will focus on road maintenance agreements with industry, It will still be of significant interest to you at SUMA as we look at tax tools and mill rate factors and other fees and charges as well. We're in the process of setting up that review right now. We're working through the terms of reference for it and deciding what sort of consultations should take place. The Ministry of the Economy is going to be actively engaged in this, and obviously so will SUMA, other municipal and business leaders, and industry associations. We expect that review and hope to have it completed by the end of the year. Again, I stress we're looking for balance here so that fees and taxes that are levied, so that both businesses and municipalities will believe that to be fair. We want to ensure that we have tax fairness and consistency and a business climate that supports sustained growth and prosperity. And now I want to talk to you, as I said I would, a little bit about public safety. Yesterday, you heard the Premier talk about the catastrophic flood that hit the eastern side of the province last summer. He talked about the incredible response of our communities helping each other. And he talked about the people. Carnduff's generosity to their friends and neighbors from Gainsborough was just one example. A quote from the mayor of Carnduff, taken from a story in an Estevan newspaper, really spoke to me, and I'd like to share it with you. This is what Mayor Ross Apperly had to say about the evacuation in Gainsborough. Mayor Apperly said, "If it was Carnduff flooding, I know the Gainsborough, Storthoaks, Caraville, and Elida people would do the same for us. We don't think we're doing anything over and above. We're doing what we have to do to help." And that's not just in Carnduff where you find people like that. The mayor of Melville, Walter Strelowski, talks about the huge amount of volunteerism and donations that happened in his community. And there are many more stories just like that from many more communities across this province. You know, this fall, I received a very nice thank you note for Mayor Strelowski. And he said, he thanked me for the role I played and our government played in helping their community respond to the disaster. And really, I should be thanking Walter and Ross and all the other mayors and councillors and community leaders and citizens from all the great communities that responded in an incredible way when that disaster hit. And I think, folks, you should give all of them a big round of applause today. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention the incredible work that was done during those difficult days and weeks by the PDAP staff and the emergency management and fire safety area of our ministry. One of our main focuses after the flood was setting up 11 different recovery centers around the affected area, including 3 First Nations. What we were trying to do is have a one-stop venue for people to seek assistance, and that was something that I was really proud we did, and the feedback we got from that approach was very, very positive. I should also acknowledge some of the other agencies that helped, the Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse, and there were many others that lent a tremendous amount of support and worked tirelessly, and I just want to publicly thank them all today. The effects of that flooding are going to be felt for years, and there's many people who are still in the early stages of recovery. So earlier this fall, we hired more PDAP staff to help process the claims as quickly as we possibly could. And you may have noticed that we have a number of PDAP staff here with us today. We're hoping that by having the staff here to address any questions or concerns you might have face-to-face with some of our most experienced program advisors, we think that'll be beneficial, and I've already had feedback that people do feel that way. I know Tammy Folwork and some of her team are here, and I hope you take the time to talk to them if you have any concerns. And even if you don't, I know they're doing great work. Just mention to them you appreciate the work that they have been doing, because they're working very hard. Dwayne McKay and Colin King from Emergency Management are also here as well and did just yeoman work last summer. So it's too early what spring may hold for us this year. Everybody knows that in Saskatchewan the weather can change in a minute. But you can know that your government will be here to continue to support our citizens should the need arise again this year. So over the last year or so, the Ministry of Government Relations and municipal associations have discussed ways to help settle annexation compensation disputes. With that in mind, about a year ago, we released a draft guideline and formula for review by municipalities across the province. And I think it's fair to say that that reaction was mixed. But consultations to date indicate that both rural and urban stakeholders are favoring the use of overarching principles for determining the compensation rather than a set formula. Now, I think the original work done by the ministry still has merit, but we're certainly prepared to compromise if we can collectively agree on an alternative. As a result of the consultations, my ministry has developed a revised set of principles which we've shared with the municipal associations. Now, those proposed principles would be used to provide guidance to municipalities in coming to a voluntary agreement on annexation compensation, or they could be used by the municipal board to settle disputes that come before them. Now, my officials have met with your representatives, with municipal associations a number of times over the past few months, and we've now reached a point where we believe a joint meeting is probably the next best step, and that's scheduled for the 3rd week in February. So we're hopeful that's going to prove fruitful. Our government still prefers that municipalities reach agreements on their own and be free to do so without the use or with the use as they see fit of these principles. But where there isn't a mutually acceptable agreement arrived at between the municipalities, these principles can provide a sense of how the municipal board will look at a claim such as this. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me say how much I enjoy being here today. Coming back to SUMA conventions, as Deb said, I'm a fixture now. It feels like coming home, and I want to thank you all for your hospitality. I have so many friends in this room. I've also acknowledged on the concerns you have with revenue sharing that we are in a period of fiscal restraint because of low oil prices. Overall, though, the foundations that we've built collectively are solid. Our economy is more diversified than it's ever been, and we have thousands more people that have joined us in recent years. And if we need to make a few tough choices over the short term, it's to ensure that our future continues to be bright. Earlier, I mentioned a column by Brian Lee Crowley in the Globe and Mail. In his column, Crowley mentions many things that Saskatchewan has going for it, thanks to the diversity of our resources and the energy of our people. In his final paragraph, he says the following, and I quote, "Saskatchewan used to be known as Tomorrow Country because the hardscrabble present could only be made bearable by the thought that the future would bring something better. There is nothing guaranteed about Saskatchewan's current success, but for now, tomorrow has finally arrived." I look forward to continuing to work with you to ensure that that continues. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Reiter. Just want to say that your comments about the growth on the Alberta versus Saskatchewan side really does push home the point that our SUMA delegates have been trying to make this week. That's saying that we really truly are partners in building our Saskatchewan, and it's working. We are a vital part of that component alongside with you, and I was glad to hear that in your speech. I know that you have to take off right away, but I want to say that your time and certainly your willingness to build partnerships with your government and our members is truly appreciated by SUMA and our board and the hundreds of members that are sitting before you here today, but the ones that aren't here as well. We understand that you do have to get away right away, but on that note, I have something. As you do know, every year when you come to speak, we make a donation on your behalf to the Mike Badham Scholarship, and this year is no different. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.